At this moment on Wall Street, the market is experiencing the most volatile trading in over a century.
Market's down 1,000 points.
I hear the exchange is a total mess.
Are your orders being acknowledged? I hope so. I've got 4 people on hold.
While other systems were stalling during one of the most volatile days,
I've got confirmation.
trading systems built on the InterSystems data platform
The order's been acknowledged.
kept brokers operating as usual.
Chaos out there.
Not so bad in here, though.
For stability in an unpredictable world, look to InterSystems.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Allison Williams, Senior Analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence, covering the global investment banks and asset managers. I'm also fortunate to work with a team globally that looks at the largest to the smallest financial institutions around the world. And obviously, technology is certainly one of the most or the most important factor shaping the industry today. As I said, from the smallest disruptive startups to the biggest institutions. And I'm excited to host this think tank discussion today on seeing around corners innovative data management. So as I said, the financial service industry is keenly focused on digital transformation. It has embraced data management innovations that have developed in recent years to accelerate this project. As the industry faces new sources of competition, innovation is an imperative. This think tank will provide a forum for an open conversation that will focus on how banks are employing innovative data management to access and organize information to drive strategy and enhance their competitive edge. Participants will also discuss how their operations have changed and the impact on culture. Viewers are encouraged to ask questions. You may enter questions and we will get to them as many as possible. Please submit your questions in the Q&A box below. Include your first name and city when asking a question. Before we begin the program, a few housekeeping notes. This is a virtual event, so please bear with us if we experience any technical issues, which we've already asked you to do a little bit so far. If you're having trouble with audio or video quality, please refresh your browser. If you're having any other trouble, open the event chat box in the bottom right-hand corner, and our support will seek to help you. This is an interactive event, and we encourage you to engage with us on Twitter using hashtag @BloombergLive. I also want to acknowledge our sponsor, InterSystems, for helping to make this virtual briefing possible today. So with that, let's get started. We have a great panel assembled today, and I'm looking forward to hearing about what they're doing and how they're leveraging innovative data management to enhance performance and the customer experience. So perhaps to kick things off, we'll begin with a question, sort of a broad question to set the stage. What is driving the need for innovation in data management? Michael, I didn't know if you want to perhaps kick us off with that one.
So I like to relate it back to supply and demand. I think it all starts with the customer, and it's really what their expectations are and what they're really looking for. And I think there's a strong focus on relevancy, right? Customers are looking for faster, smarter, better services that are tailored to them. That's driving what services need to be created for hyper-personalization, insights. All that kind of requires a greater amount of data that needs to be delivered fast, right? And to handle that, I think firms are realizing that, and they're becoming more data-driven. And that's one part. And then a second factor is the data itself. And we always talk about the V's of data, the volumes, velocity, variety, diversity, right? That has outpaced our traditional data approaches. And we need to kind of think in new ways. And another factor I'll bring in is the increased usage of AI and ML, right? And that obviously has they always want more data, clean data, obviously, but you need it to create the models, to train the models, and to feed the models as they run. And I think altogether, with the rise of customer centricity, the explosion of data, and the increased uses of analytics, right? These are some of the main drivers that I see.
Okay, great. And Kate, did you want to chime in there?
I would. Thanks, Alison. And Mark's absolutely right. So there is a lot of demand from our customers, but we also must remember that we're in a very regulated industry. So there's a lot of demand from our regulators for very clean data sets, enhanced understanding of what we have and what we're acquiring. There's also quite a lot of bad actors out there, so the risks and the threats are escalating and increasing, and we have to be ever vigilant in this space. And at the same time, as Mark said, we're generating more data, it's more complex. We're venturing into new data sets, for example, to fulfill our sustainability commitments. There's climate data, there's all sorts of carbon footprint stuff we need to understand. So all of that complexity means that we can no longer rely on traditional data management sort of techniques and how things were done 10 years ago and even 5 years ago. We really have to harness technology to help us in this quest. And we must innovate quite rapidly because this space is evolving and doing so very, very, very fast.
It's tough to keep up. And perhaps building on that and thinking about the broader organization, what is the relationship between the technology staff and the business, and how has that changed? Neil, do you want to kick us off with that one?
Absolutely. So I think the way I would say is that not just related to the data, but in general, when you talk about the data or the digital, I think the relationship between the technology and the business has gone a lot more healthy and a lot more collaborative in the recent years, which is a really a welcome sign. Now, I would say just specific to data perspective, I think there is a huge realization, both from a technology and business perspective, that this is key to our success. I mean, we really need to harness data, which Michael was talking about, or Kate was talking about, and it's not easy, right? Because we are in the banking industry, we have a huge amount of data which in the different silos, and making sure that we can try to find the right opportunities which can provide the value to the customer is important, and it's easier said than done. So there are a lot of kind of a brainstorming session in terms of finding the right sources and making sure we can use those sources to really kind of get a pattern out of it, right? So I see that going on in multiple ways in the industry at US Bank as well. The other thing which I would say just from a technology and business perspective is of people. I don't think we talk so much about people, and people play a key role there. And the way I would say that, on our side at US Bank, I mean, we have been really driving the engineering-led culture for some time. And the reason being because while we are talking about data and the technology platform to build the data on, we want to make sure that we are also moving more on the technical direction and building the platform for the future. And so whether it's really talking about having the jam sessions, really talking about having those technical brown bags and all that. So that is what we are promoting, and at the same time making sure we have a dedicated career path for the people who are on the technical role. So I think all these things really healthy from an industry standpoint, where we are kind of challenging each other and kind of building on top of what we already have.
That's interesting, and it's true about the volume of data. And I don't know if anyone wants to speak to. There's actually a question from the audience that sort of speaks to that. How do you think about the volume of data versus the quantity of data? Does anyone want to kick us off there?
So
Do you want to?
Yeah, definitely, I can take it, and I will go back to your first question, which you said, So I think technology is the one which is driving this innovation, but when it comes to the volume and the quality of the data, see, this is what happened in last 10 years, right? The data collection. Earlier, the data collection used to be very small, right? And now suddenly what happened is storage became much cheaper, data collection became much easier, and we started collecting more data. Boom. Now we are at a point where the volume is huge. Now the volume is there, but that's the data which is just lying there. And now when we talk about the quality, so I'm not sure if the audience question is the quality around the integrity of the data or the quality around is how to use the data. But my thinking is both of them are very critical, because if the volume has increased, but the integrity of the data and the quality is bad, then it is pretty clear the output is going to be bad. So that is from that point of view, we need to invest in the technologies to make sure that we maintain the quality and the integrity of the data. And there are many ways to do this. But then there is another quality what I think about is the quality. How do we use the data? How do we consume the data? And this is where what insights you bring out, how do you make those insights actionable? That also is a part of the quality of the data to me, Allison.
I think
Yeah,
that's
Alison, I would like to
important.
add to that if possible. So, building upon that, I think the two, trying to weigh volume versus quality, I kind of think you need both, right? Like you're to power all the decision-making capabilities and our processing capabilities, you need both. And I would actually kind of roll it all way backwards that for us to be able to handle the volume and also maintain good quality, you kind of actually need to utilize AI and ML within your data processing capabilities, right? So think about using the data and metrics that you even draw upon it and be able to actually help and assist all the different personas that are working on your data. And so that kind of starts allowing you to help manage the volume. So think about, instead of doing it manually, there's some machinery, automation that's doing it for you, and you're handling the exceptions, right? Getting alerts when there's problems or things have changed and you need to kind of take a look at. Obviously, we always want self-healing, but there's going to be many occasions where you're going to need human eyes on it, right? And due to that volume, you need to make sure that you empower our data stewards, our data engineers, with the ability to handle this, right, from the volume and the quality standpoint.
Yeah, I think in equity analysis, we have a saying, garbage in, garbage out, in terms of focusing on the quality of the data. And I think you all really nailed it in terms of the importance of that. And so I think that brings us to maybe thinking about implementation. John, do you want to maybe kick things off talking about maybe some of the challenges you've faced in implementation or some of the more creative solutions you've come up with?
One of the bigger problems that I face, formerly as a consultant and then here again, is you have a fair amount of disintermediation in financial services back office software. So you have a variety of sort of unregulated data standards for things even as simple as a social security number. Does it have dashes, et cetera? Enforcing the standards between the software providers and our data warehouse, which is our source for all of our analytics tools, was a pretty critical challenge. There are software providers, for instance, where their data entry heuristics allow alpha where numeric characters should be there. So, those types of things that I believe should be pretty simple. Because there's a lack of, uniform data standards, particularly on entry fields, that can be a large challenge. And then once it's in the warehouse, isolating, regulatory versus consumer type journey experience, chain type of product offerings is the next challenge. So separating out what you need for your regulators, what you need for your compliance and third line staff, and then what ultimately you're going to use to direct consumers to the appropriate products and services at the right time is another challenge.
Okay, great. Thanks for those insights. And I guess, sort of along the way and with a lot of things we're talking about, culture was something that came up earlier. Kate, you work in a relatively larger institution with sort of a perhaps longer standing culture. Can you talk about, within your bank, how you've seen technology change the culture? Has it changed the culture, and how do you manage that?
So one of the things that we aspire to be in this space is to be a data-led organization. And we've stated that aspiration we can very, very publicly throughout all the different forums in HSBC. And that means that it's not just technology. We really need to understand the interplay of policy, culture, overall culture of the organization, and technology platform. And we need to have kind of a healthy number of professionals who can help the rest of the organization get there. But we also need the data literacy to be quite high across the organization. And when you are as big as we are, 64 markets and 275 petabytes of data and growing, that is no small feat. So we are using technology and interesting technological developments to kind of hook people in, to get them to be excited about data. And then we bring them into sort of other more traditional data management disciplines and kind of try to use those more exciting paths in to then help them understand the basics, like garbage in, garbage out, like what role everybody has to play in making sure that we are taking care of our data, that it is treated like any other asset of the bank. So we're rolling out quite a large-scale literacy program across HSBC. And again, the ambition is to make sure we get everybody from board members to branch members to all sorts of folks and give them the right tools, that we're making them comfortable interacting with data, because that's one of the things that I observe is sometimes folks are very fearful. They don't want to dip their toe in the water. They think it's only I know what to do with it, and it's probably best left to data professionals. So we're trying to get everybody on the journey.
I think it's part of the learning process, as some of us know. There's always a pushback at the beginning, but if you can deliver the benefit, if they see the benefit to the client, they know it's a benefit to the business, and it's easier to get on board. Michael, did you want to add something?
So, and I think on that aspect, I would just add a couple of more things. So, just as an industry, right, in the financial industry, I mean, big bank and a lot of data sources. So, what couple of things which we are doing also from a cultural standpoint is that really making sure that there is top down and the bottom up approach, where we say this is the data platform we are going, and when we are doing all the projects or the big program, there is a I would say lean governance model to make sure that we are not swallowing more and more data. We are basically using the same data platform which we are building. So I think if you can start doing that, then you can stop data sprawling to a lot of silos as you start doing the project and making sure that you are marching towards the common goal of using the data platform. So I think to me that's working well, because that does mean that eventually it's a journey we are starting, but eventually we'll get there where we'll have all the data coming from the common data platform. So I do think that it's been hugely successful. And I think that is the right way to really tackle this, at least for the big enterprises.
Alison, can I add 30 seconds here? And I think I love to add on what Kate and Anil was saying, and this is the culture and the data. And it is interesting in last 10 years, how everyone is moving towards the data driven. Like here in the Silicon Valley, any startup is popping up. When I talk to them, one of the things they say, oh, we have a data, right? And what is a unification of a culture and the data? I think at the end of the day, if all of us sit back, and if I'm a customer or a consumer, or if I'm an employee of a small company or a big company, I don't care how this data, how this sausage is getting made. What I care about is I need an information, and how fast I can get that information, and what is the meaning of this information. That is the data. And there are simple examples. I remember in 2010, if I am working in an organization and I need to I need to find out who's on a vacation, either I need to send an email and see it comes back. But now there are tools available. I can log in and I can say, hey, Deep is on vacation today, right? So this is, to me, how do we take and make this data accessible to everyone? And that technology piece, which is making it so simple. Like sometimes when we go, for example, I work in other companies, and when you go to certain screens and you see that stock value is going up or down, people only see green and red, but they don't see what is happening behind the machine. So I think the culture is mostly pushed where everyone is expecting at this moment of time, give me the data, and it is a responsibility of the data leaders like all of us to make it easily and in a meaningful way to accessible to everyone, this data.
Great.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the discussion's been around like the consumer or end consumer being external to the organization. I think, the highest lift in value we've seen is data, driven sort of rules or analytics in the cost centers. So, avoiding sort of the sample review report repeat cycle and putting everything on a rule set, anything that's time bound or numeric driven, computer, things that are best done by a computer, running it on 100% sample base versus, some sort of statistical or judgmental sample. And ultimately, I think in the future, you'll be able to write reports based on those error rates and with or without accepted tolerances. So those type of innovations where your second and third line functions become more and more automated from a testing perspective are huge savers.
Michael, do you want to round it out on this important topic? Anything to add?
Part of it is like from a company standpoint, if you want to be innovative, it's kind of, you can't go alone, right? Like everything has to go with you. So you think about agility, having agility everywhere. It starts with data agility that leads to business agility. And then I think as others have mentioned, it also provides customer agility, right? Doing what they need, what they want, when they want it. I think that's kind of something that is a trend as to where we're all going. And it's driving that huge need of data, right?
Okay, great. We do have a number of audience questions, so maybe I'll pick a couple. We already talked about the data quality is something that already came up. Here's sort of a more specific question. How does adopting cloud help break down silos between departments? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I'm happy to get us started on that one. So again, in HSBC, we have very well publicized and very public journey to the cloud. And because of our size and footprint, we have a number of cloud providers. So it's not just sort of picking your favorite one and doubling down on it. So our data strategy had to be pretty elaborate, given our footprint and the regulated nature of what we do. What I saw it as a huge opportunity to kind of make sure that we build the new world on the cloud the way we would love everything to be on premise now. So to really introduce a lot of the good hygiene practices for all data sets. And that's what we've done. We sort of spend a lot of time making sure that our architecture for the cloud is very, very clear. We have a lot of standard and guideline that's easy to comply with. And we also build surveillance capabilities as we started onboarding workloads onto the cloud to make sure that again, you're sort of data compliant by design. And we don't end up with remediation activities like you do on occasion with something that's legacy. So it's very, very exciting journey for us. And it also helps encourage departments to kind of onboard something onto a cloud data set once and then reuse it by multiple folks. So you're kind of reducing the number of chatter between the systems if you do it right.
When we think about the cloud, right, it is the scaling and the volume we talked about. By moving into a cloud, you can increase the volume of or the scale of the data at a much faster pace by scaling out rather than keep scaling up and up and up. But you can you can still be in a cloud, but if you don't, as Kate said, if you don't have the right strategy, you can still make the mistakes with your data, right? I think is sometimes people get confused thinking, oh, I will move into a cloud and everything is going to be solved for me. But that's a myth. To me, that helps you reducing your costs, how fast you move, but you need to continue to invest in making sure that integrity of the data, privacy of the data, security of the data, accessibility of those data those pieces needs to be considered pretty well when you are on a cloud.
I actually don't think it's purely about the cloud, right? So if you think about how you break down silos across departments and try to facilitate usage of the vast amount of data within an organization, it's more about how you manage your data, I think, to what others have said. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in the cloud. You could still have on-prem, in the cloud, or a hybrid of the two. It's really how you're managing your data, right? So, you could have platforms that allow you to kind of span the across, and that allows you, we'll probably talk a little more about security, but that allows you to kind of separate data and give you a lot more reassurance that the data isn't out somewhere that in the wild that potentially can be stolen, right? I think cloud has been a facilitator, right? It gives you, as mentioned, vast amount of storage and compute. But I wouldn't say that that's purely the reason why the silos are being broken down. It's more about now a new mentality of making data accessible across the organization and monetizing that, right? Like it's more about how do you extract that. And in many occasions, you don't need to move it, and in some occasions, you can't move it. So it's kind of more like, how do you be able to kind of connect everything together, some on-prem, some in the cloud, some in between, and all over across regions and so forth. I think that, in my opinion, has more to do with how you're making data more accessible, breaking down the silos, making increasing usage, and getting a lot more value out of your data.
And Alison, I would just add a little more technical point on that one. And I do agree. I think it depends on the organization whether we want to pursue a public cloud or private or hybrid, which Mike you just talked about. I think to me, in a big enterprise, once you have the strategy, I think it's more about how are we aligning the whole organization towards our strategy technically in terms of feeding the data, the right data, and also consuming. So making sure that you have the right connectors or the right way where all the source systems are sending the right data to this kind of a data platform, let's call it. At the same time, you also have the other side where you are building application left and right across the different customer touch point or the fraud application, KYC application, which needs to consume the data. So how do we make those things easy from a consumption perspective for the different group in the company is also extremely important. Otherwise, you can build a data platform, but you may not get the adoption you're looking for. So I just think that while build the data platform, at the same time, let's try to start thinking about how we are feeding the data at the same time how we are consuming the data for the downstream system is really important as an organization.
So when you come across a compelling new technology, but that would sit at the core of your infrastructure, how can you adopt that?
I think if you already have a large, complex installation, I think the bar is pretty high, right? You kind of, if it isn't working, obviously, so like resolving pain points can definitely help drive adoption, right? But say it's new and more of an additive service, I think if you take a use case driven approach, and so you kind of generate purpose, and the adoption can be a lot more natural and a lot easier to happen, right? I think adoption specifically to new tech. I mean, you really have to have clear and uniform direction across your organization, right? No matter what you do, you kind of have to make sure that we're all going in the same direction, right? Like, and then there's other pieces of it, right? How do you facilitate adoption? Like if it becomes effective very quickly, if it's very easy to use, thinking about generating time to value very quickly, right? You can prove this effectiveness and you build on success upon success. And that will really kind of say, starts breaking down barriers, saying, yes, this can work, and it does work. And then other factors that might play in is is that new functionality able to scale, and you can extend and adapt it to kind of new needs, right? I think those kind of roll together, demonstrating value very quickly, building upon success really kind of would help with the adoption factor.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to add there. I mean, if your organization doesn't have an incubation group, right, for new technology, emerging tech, that's probably going to raise the bar significantly. So, for instance, my group piloted AI in the second line, right? It didn't work. The commercial providers' capabilities fell far below what we could do on our own. And we ultimately abandoned it in a 6-month pilot here. So that ability to quickly iterate in an incubation-driven environment, and each of our business units has the ability to do incubation pilots and proof of concepts. If you're not that agile, or that if you don't have a structure dedicated specifically to incubating new and emerging technology, that's problematic and it raises the bar. So if everything has to be decided centrally at the board of directors or executive management, without that ability to prove a concept, that raises the bar significantly.
Adopting new technology doesn't always mean you are replacing your core banking system, right? It could be a partnership with a fintech. So we've had a number of very successful companies that we partnered with and then adopted their technology and then took a stake in the company. So Quintex is one of the very well-publicized partnerships that we have in our financial crime space. BioCatch for, again, fraud prevention. So you can kind of augment your technology stack, if you will, by starting to introduce those technologies and then ramping up. The other thought from me is I see quite a number of kind of emerging tech solutions in my role. And a lot of times they're sort of solutions looking for problems, if you will. So you really need to understand what is the business problem you're trying to solve, especially if you're going to go and rip out something at the core of your business process, and need to weigh up, is it worth it? What's your total cost of ownership now? What is this new technology giving you? And as some of the other panelists mentioned, is it scalable, right? Is it going to go across 64 markets like we need it to, or is it something more localized? So it's quite nuanced, and that's why the bar to entry might be perceived as high. But on the other hand, especially during the pandemic last year, we rolled out successfully quite a number of very core products, and again, amazing efforts by our technology teams. And we know how to do that if you really feel like it's part of the business proposition. But that's what needs to be weighed up in my mind.
We're almost out of time, but I'll squeeze in this last angle, and this might be a kind of a good follow-on for you, Kate, to some of the comments you made. But the question relates to data and analytics being under the digital umbrella, and how do you bring that to the C-suite in a big organization? I don't know if there's perhaps a last comment that you want to add, or if anyone else had something they want to add.
Well, for us, I guess it was one of the changes we made, right? So data used to sort of sit under technology, and we made an organizational change and brought it out into its own discipline that is now on par with other functions and technology, and sort of cuts across. And that's been very, very healthy elevation of focus for us. And you have to, as a data professional, you have to kind of put your boots on and go to the board, to the C-suite, to the business, to the technologists, and relentlessly educate and get everybody excited about the mission.
I would just add to that one. I think just as an organization standpoint, I mean, you can. I mean, it's not so much about the reporting structure in my view. It's more about what's the focus we have from the top management, and I can say that I mean, as an industry, I think there's a huge focus. I mean, you're starting with CEO and CIO. I mean, everybody is really focused on the data side, including on our bank, right? But the main thing is that what are we doing about it? And what I was saying earlier is that really making sure that we kind of drive the data mindset of our organization, where any decisions which we are making, whether it is on technology side or business side or new product which you want to launch. It's all dependent on the data, whether we have the right information to make that decision. And it doesn't have to be a top level. I mean, even if you're a developer or a data scientist or a business analyst, you basically start looking through that lens when you are making a decision at your level. Second thing, which I was just talking about from a culture perspective, and in my view, both the data and the digital, goes hand in hand. And making sure that when we are really kind of launching new products which are more customer facing, we are connecting the dot for the customer. So for the customer goes to one channel like online banking, but then it goes to more like mobile banking or the call center or the branches. We know history about the customer. So I do think that at some point of time, while we have data as a platform, but this kind of binds the organization together on what you really want to do and really launch from a customer standpoint and also the new product standpoint. And I think that's the key. And I do see that there's a huge focus from top down and bottom up.
I'll add one last comment there. I think a lot of financial services institutions, I think like 5 years ago, started saying that they're not really a services company. They're a technology company, right? And you kind of understand why, because technology is ingrained in everything that they do, and they see that as a differentiator. And now you can almost now see the next wave as saying, are you truly a technology company, or are you actually a data company, right? Because what is that core to everything that you do, right? What is that valuable resource that you have? It's the data, right? And I think, as we mentioned kind of throughout, it's what do you do with that data, right? How do you monetize it? How do you make that something that will generate value for yourself and also for your customers? And I think that's a shift within organizations. I think, as everyone has mentioned, top down, bottom up, all across, because it's really about how you provide that value, right? And I think that you need everyone to be literate. You need to everyone be tech savvy in a certain regard. So.
Anyone else?
And I'll add just one last thing. I mean, I agree 100%. I mean, the financial services, has gone from evolution to sort of brick mortar technology, and we are analytics companies now. If you can't provide consumer-driven insights or time-driven, location-driven insights for your consumer now, then your products are falling behind, non-bank competitors, and that's problematic. At the same time, that conversion to an analytics company is very difficult to communicate up. Access kind of was born online, so it's a little bit easier here. But at the same time, explaining, to a board member, hey, do you know why, you constantly see an advertisement for Allen Edmonds shoes when you submit a recrafting order on your computer, and just explaining in very simple, real, world terms, how that is possible and why we are doing that here. Because that consumer insight, behavioral insight, ultimately drives revenue and lowers costs.
And Alison, I'm going to go in a little different direction here, because I think that's how we want to perceive ourselves. We are a technology company, we are a data company, but let's shift the gear and think who we are serving, right? So we are Borrow Bank. I can be a technology company, I can be a data company, but does it matter? What matters at the end of the day is our consumers or the customers are getting the value what they are supposed to get. And technology and the data are the enablers to provide those value. So I think sometimes we get confused and again, this may be a shift in some bigger companies, but we get confused in defining who we are from an internal perception point of view. But the end consumers doesn't think that way.
Well, there's the challenge, obviously, also to get the consumer to engage with you if they've become or historically have been transactional only with you, right? So the ability to engage a consumer and have them voluntarily provide data, either knowingly or through their device, is a challenge, right? So that's why you see new players in the space using gamification or coolification type of attractive features to get people to, like I said, knowingly or unknowingly provide valuable insights about their location, their behavior, their likes, their dislikes, et cetera. And to the extent that financial services aren't thinking that way, it's clearly time to do so.
A great point, and it's interesting, right? The consumer is shopping for an experience, but is it the data or the technology, the combination of the two, really to provide that experience?
It's our role to make that not a distinguishing or non-distinguishable for the consumer. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as simple as, for example, customer do a lot of transactions, right? And when you go online, you see all, hundreds of transactions, but we don't provide so much information about the, where they are spending and all that. So, for example, spend analyzer and all that, those are the really great tool which you can provide to your customers so that they can make more responsible decision. For example, so this is something we did at US Bank. But I will also give a very simple example. Sometimes we talk about data platform and make it very complex. I think we can start very simple as well. So, and my favorite example is that, if you go to Starbucks every day and you spend $2, and you see those transactions, right? But at the same time, if I say that, Anil, you spent $200 on Starbucks in the month of March, maybe that will provide a little bit better insight to the customer, or Anil, maybe Anil has to think about whether, he needs to reduce his expenditure on Starbucks. I think those are very simple ways you can use a power of data. Now, this has nothing to do with AI or ML. This is a very simple way of I would say, collecting the data and providing the information to the customer.
Yeah, it's interesting across the various organizations, and you all obviously have very different strategies firm-wide, but the sort of the similar focus on culture, on data quality, obviously is something that's across the firms, and then each of your own ways of defining competitive advantage and how to best serve the customer. Okay, now I think we are almost out of time. Does anyone have any other closing thoughts they want to provide to the audience?
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak and for hosting the forum. Thank you.
And Alison, I will say the same thing. Thanks for hosting, and thanks to all other panelists for being here. But I will also, for the audience, I will say, when you think about the data, always start with the question why.
And I'll join the panelists in thanking InterSystems. Write to us on Twitter using #@BloombergLive. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. We welcome everybody's feedback. Thank you again to our great speakers. Again, it was great to get viewpoints from thought leaders in the industry. Thanks for the audience for being so engaged and sending along such great questions. Again, thank you to InterSystems for supporting today's event. Please check out the resources tab on the event website for additional content from InterSystems. And a replay of today's event will be available on BloombergLive.com, along with an event highlights article. So thank you, everyone, again, and please enjoy the rest of your day and stay well. Take care.